Okay, so this is the lesson that goes along with the PowerPoint slides that teaches you guys how to start this process of doing online forms. There are three different controls that I'm going to review with you guys today. The first one is the submit button. The second one will be the reset button, and then the two different text boxes, the single line text box and the text area box. So let's get into this. I've gone ahead and created two different forms. Two different online or HTML files. The first one I call Forms Lesson, and the second one I've called Page 2. At this stage of the game, please pause the video and create those two files for yourself, and make sure that you create a new site. Again, you're going to come into Manage Sites, click New Site, and call it Forms Your Last Name, and save it onto your server folder in a folder called Forms Your Last Name. Click cancel to that. I'll show you that mine was done correctly. Forms Lesson 2014. I called it Lessons 2014, and then I put it into a folder called Forms Musto. You go ahead and do the same thing and create a folder called Forms Your Last Name. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is go over this forms lesson.html. You'll notice I've got this very basic page going. There's two different buttons on the bottom. And then I've got text area box, single line text boxes going on in the center. Very, very simple. The other thing too I want you to notice visually is you've got this red dotted line going on around the whole shebang. This indicates to you visually in the Dreamweaver window where your form tag starts and where your form tag ends. If you take a look in my code window here, you'll notice at the top I've got the form identification values and so forth. And then at the end of the file, just before the body tag ends, there's an ending form tag. Okay, so the first page in your notes gets into the form tag itself and what the different variables are or the attributes are. If you take a look here, I've got the form identification that's set up through Dreamweaver. There's the method attribute that's in your notes. And again, the two different choices are post or get. We're going to go into that in more detail in a few minutes. And then on this end, you've got the action tag. Notice that it's already set up with your equal sign and your quotations. And your action tab tells the browser what you want to do with the form when you submit it. We'll get into that in a second. So I'm going to go to page 2. That's very, very simple here. And I'll go ahead and eliminate this and start over. So over here is your form tag. You can go and click on this. It's going to give you a red dotted line. And again, it's going to populate in your code window your form tag with the method and the action that I just mentioned and the ending form tag. As I go into here, the red dotted line is only visually there so that I can see where my form tags start and stop. It won't appear on your web page. You want only one form tag per submit button. So as you're going through this process, if you have multiple red dotted lines or multiple red boxes, you've probably done it incorrectly. You only want one red dotted line or one form tag per submit button. Now, the way that this is set up, it's in the classic view. So if you're not seeing things the way that you're seeing them here in the video, change this view to classic. And I'm on the Forms tab here instead of the Common tab, which is where we usually work. I'm going to go ahead and click the button. Now Dreamweaver wants to know identifications and labels. Labels essentially are the text that go next to the controls. At this stage of the game, I'm not going to put text next to it, so I'm going to leave the label alone. For the identification, I'm just going to label it submit so that I know that this is the submit button moving forward. Not a big deal, okay? Now, in the notes you'll see or under the buttons, the value of the button by default is submit. So I'm going to go ahead and change that value to be go to original page. Okay, now it's going to go ahead and resize the button and type out whatever I put into my value area here. I'm going to leave the action for this to be the submit form action, which is what I want it to do. Now the second button that you're able to do is a reset button. Essentially it's the same thing as a submit button. It just resets the controls before it. I'm going to click the button tab here again. I'm going to get the identification information. I'm going to leave the label blank and click OK. And then I'm going to change the action down here to reset. Now this button is going to reset the form and not submit it, which is totally different. I'm going to go ahead here into the value window to show you that you can change that too, and change it to I'll change to start over. Okay. So there's that. Now I'm going to save this page and go back to the forms lesson page that has more stuff on it. I'm going to show you that this one is page 2. Value is set to page 2. The action is set to submit form. This one is reset. The value is set to reset. And the action is set to reset the form. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you how this looks in the browser. So I'm going to populate the F12 here. And I have some stuff in these boxes. I'm going to go over that in a second. But when I come in and I hit reset, I'm going to change stuff to be something else. And when I click the reset button, it goes back to what the page used to be. So essentially, this button now does the same thing as refreshing the page here. Okay? Same kind of concept. At this stage of the game, the submit button does the same exact thing. Prove it they don't believe you. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and it appears to do the same thing as the reset. And the reason for that is I haven't told Dreamweaver what to do with this page 2. I'm going to do that now, so I'll go back into the Dreamweaver window. For page 2, there's 2 different ways to do this. Unfortunately, down in your properties panel, it doesn't have a nice little link shortcut that you can just click on. It's a little bit of coding, which is why she taught you coding in the first place. So I'm going to come into my page 2 area here, and down on the bottom, actually, excuse me, on the top for the form action, I'm going to go right into here in my code window, and I'm going to say page2.html. Now I need to make sure that I spell this correctly, so I'm going to go ahead and confirm. I may have done it with a capital P, and I did. And I have to always do the .html. This is for a local page link. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I'm going to come back to my page 2, and I'd like this submit button to open the forms lesson page. Okay, now notice this is forms_lesson.html. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I code that properly. Again, I'll go into here, and I'm going to do forms lesson_lesson.html, just the way that I saved it originally. So I'm going to save these 2. Actually, I can just do File, Save All. And let's load the first page into the browser. So now this one will go, after I populate the boxes or not, we'll go to page 2. Notice this is the page 2 one. And then onto here, I'm going to go ahead and go to the original page, and these both work correctly. The other way to do this in Dreamweaver is through the actual submit button down in here. So I'm going to put my cursor into this zone, and if I type in form action and double click it, it'll let me browse for the file. Now I don't have to type it anymore. I can change it to whatever and click OK, and then it will work like a charm. Okay. If I want to have this open up an online page, however, I'll go ahead and do that now for you. I'm going to click on this page 2. I'm going to say Google so that it does something different. And I'm going to come back into here. And let me get the Google link. And I'm copying that. And now I'll go back to my Dreamweaver window. And for this Google button, instead of going to a local page like I just did a second ago, I'm going to change that form action to open up the actual Google page. Make sure that your quotations are in place properly. Make sure also that you copy and paste that link so that the right URL ends up in that zone. Now this is not going to work. I know that for a fact, so in the interest of time, I'm going to fix why it won't work. The method equal post, well, let me show you it. I'll save it up, and now when I go into this page and I click on Google, it's going to give me an error, and it tells me right up front on this particular site that it doesn't like post as a method. Okay, not a big deal, very easy to fix. I'll go back into my Dreamweaver window, and again, this is in the PowerPoint slide notes, but the method is set to post. I'm going to change that method to get. I'm going to save it up again, come back into my browser, and when I click Google Now, it'll go to the Google site. Okay, so please pause this as we're going through. I know I'm going quickly, but I want to just make sure that you have things at the rate of speed that works for you. Now, look I've got untitled documents galore. Don't do that. Make sure that when you come into yours that you populate your title to be what it is. This particular one is supposed to be Forms Lesson. I'll name it my name. And then on this one, I'm going to just change it to page 2. Okay. Now, getting back to this button here, I've got single line text boxes for 4 different areas. Okay, first things first. The way that I did this is I clicked on here to the text field. For the identification, I always give it a name that makes sense to me. So let's do city and click OK to that. Now for the label, that's the text that's going to be on the actual document, and you can set it up to be before the text box or after it. I'll go ahead and do it this way so that you can see this in action and click OK. Now notice that I have the city as the text labeled before the actual text box, but it's not the end of the world because I can come in here and modify that. If I do a typo or whatever, I'll do an additional text box and we'll call this one for your state. And I'm not going to actually use the label ahead of it. And then I'll just go to the front of this and I'll type state. So I can go in and do that label before, after, today, tomorrow, next week, or via this little label thing in here. Okay, so for your text boxes, let me just delete that extra one. A couple of different things. I only have a few minutes before it cuts me off, so I'm going to go quickly. The character width is set to 25 characters by default. If I wanted to go for a 2-character state, I'm going to change the width of this to be 2. And I'm also going to change the maximum characters to be 2. And the reason I'm doing that is when I specify maximum characters, when I go in and I change and I type into that box on the browser, it's going to go ahead and only allow me to do 2 characters. You can see that I'm clicking, and it's not letting me do more. So I have the maximum characters set on this one to be 5. And then if I go ahead and, well, I'm hitting enter and it's going to the Google site because of the submit button. Hold on. Let me refresh this page. So here, I'm going to go ahead, I'll type something that isn't notes, and notice that I'm typing and typing and typing, and it will not let me go beyond the maximum character set. And last name, though, I can continue to go, and it will keep going. So that's what maximum characters allows you to do. Okay, the last control we're going to do today is the text area box. Very simple to do, just another variation of a single line box, but it's longer, and it's designed for open-ended style questions. So you'll notice that I have one created here, and I have an initial value set to tell me how you really feel with a question mark. The label thing works exactly the same way. I'll come into the text area box here and click it, and I'm going to call it snow. And I'm not going to worry about the label for now because I already typed it ahead of time. Again, the label is the text that goes before the item or after the item on the actual page. Now down in here, I can specify my initial value. And I can specify the width of the actual box. I'll go to 50 to make it a little bit wider. And then the number of lines. Okay, so that you can disable it and do other things on it too. For today, we're just going to leave it as it is, and that gives me an opportunity to type and type and type. There are no maximum characters on here, so in the browser when I demonstrate that, it'll allow me to type and type and type. It'll let me hit the enter button and continue to go to the next line. And word wrap is on, so once I get to the end of the actual box, it's going to go ahead and go to the next line and also activate these scroll bars. I'll reset it so that the buttons go back, and again this one goes to Google. Now I just want to demonstrate one more time that page 2 goes to page 1. At this stage I want you to go and do Forms Lesson 1. I have saved it on my site. Have fun!